Okay, this week's episode of Quackaholics Anonymous, I want to talk about an article that appeared in Vice about the culture of AA and how it perpetuates sexual abuse. And it was kind of a major topic in the deprogramming from AA community. I was about to call it the anti AA community, which is more what I would call myself. But there's a lot of people that are mainly dedicated to exposing the fraud, the religious cult, and the other just numerous horrendous things that go on behind the scenes in the recovery community, not just for the purpose of blowing the lid open on the doors of AA, but it's also to help people. And it's kind of what I'm actually trying to do too. It's also trying to attempt to help people who are getting sucked into the program, or people that might consider entering the program, and to make them aware of what sort of thing they're entering. AA almost has like two different types of literature. They have the literature for the public, and they have almost like those meetings that are open to the public. They have a very different atmosphere altogether than what happens when you're truly an indoctrinated cult member that are in closed meetings. I'm really surprised that somebody hasn't actually gone undercover and gone to those meetings and just sat in the back and just watched what goes on. I mean, the things people say, the things the literature says, the behavior that people openly brag about engaging in. It's really an eye opener. It's really impossible to describe to people who are completely unaware of it. I mean, I've met people, in everyday ordinary life, that if the topic of AA somehow gets brought up, I'll just tell them. I don't immediately, go into all the details. It would be impossible, and it sounds almost so fanciful that unless you had been involved in it, it would sound like almost something that you would see in some kind of freaking movie or something. But I just make it well known that I don't agree with the disease theory of alcoholism. It's actually not a theory because it has no evidence whatsoever to even substantiate it. But I make it very obvious that I'm highly critical of the 12-step approach to addiction. And a lot of people say, well, I mean, even if that's true, it is nice group therapy. It helps a lot of people out. And, the reality of the situation is it's not group therapy. It's not helping a lot of people out. It's harming a lot of people. And I think this article was, finding it was a major, it's a major victory for people like myself and many others that really know what AA is behind the scenes and know what kind of horrible organization it really is. But I'll post a link to it in the comment section of the video when I get done. Uh, it touches upon things, of course, that I think anybody who's been in AA for any substantial period of time would not be actually all that surprised about. Uh, I used to see people routinely share about how they were molested as children, or how they had been raped, or how they were actually assaulted by old timers that were active in the program, and how they were told by sponsors and told by AA members that they had to do an inventory about it and they had to look at their part in it. That's something I actually witnessed, and I think anybody who's honest about it that's been in AA have heard people share about that. I've heard people talk about having to do inventories about the person who raped them and how they had to learn to forgive the rapist, and how they really did play a part in it, and all kinds of other. It's really a victim blaming culture, and it's impossible to totally convey to people that haven't seen it firsthand. But this article does a good job of actually bringing it into the public spotlight. I don't actually know the lady who wrote the article. I know, and I saw an allegation when it was posted online publicly that this article was manipulated by the director of 13 Step to Film, and the people selected were selected by them, and come to find out that's blatantly untrue. As a matter of fact, this article has people who are very much pro Alcoholics Anonymous in it. But it's typical behavior of cult members. The one thing I guess that I could start off with before I touch on anything else is the fact that the article in the public, uh, I guess it was on Vice's page. I'm not really sure where it was posted on the social media online, but of course the article wasn't up longer than 10 minutes before it was flooded with comments from cult members. And of course, you know, when you're kind of like me and the people like me out there that know exactly what Alcoholics Anonymous really is and who have dealt with Alcoholics Anonymous members, it's not surprising how they behaved. I mean, they all said that, you know, nobody in AA is ever told to look at their part in it, and they defended the fact that they're sexual predators in AA. Some people tried to pass it off as, you know, well, it's the court system. The court system sends all these predators to AA. Now, while there may be some truth to that, anybody who's watched my videos knows how I feel about that, because of the fact that the most dangerous people I ever saw in Quackaholics Anonymous, okay, the most vile, the most disgusting, the most horrendous people I ever saw in the rooms of Quackaholics Anonymous, they weren't there by court order. They were respected, established old-timers who had 20 and 25 years under their belt. People who were looked up to in the meetings and admired. The type of people that, you know, you didn't dare say anything bad about them for, you know, fear of repercussion for becoming a pariah in AA and more or less made to feel unwelcome. One thing, I'm going to probably have to do a lot of leading back and forth here because I'm looking at the article and talking at the same time. But one paragraph here that sticks out from the article, from someone who wants to remain anonymous, an AA member, said that sexual abuse in AA is not the same as it is in the outside world. Not at all, because you're taught that AA is the only way that you're going to be able to survive. You're taught that if you leave meetings, you're going to drink, you're going to use, you're going to die. And she told the journalist, so to speak out against sexual harassment in meetings, it's like risking your life. Leaving meetings means, you know, using or drinking, and that means jails, institutions, and death. And the author of this particular piece mentions that jails and institutions, death is a commonly used phrase. She has it here that it's taken from Narcotics Anonymous literature. I didn't realize that because I heard that phrase over and over and over again in AA. And it does refer to a so-called inevitable fate ahead for those who leave the fellowship. That you can't be free until you find your part in the inventory. You know, the whole entire AA meetings, if you go to a lot of them, it's always about, you know, sooner or later, on a regular basis, the topic is brought up that you have to do inventories about things. As someone who did an inventory, I can tell you what that entails. I mean, it's not actually what I would call any kind of healthy therapy. It's not even good therapy, you know, because all you're doing is writing down what you resent, what you fear, and then you're supposed to write down about your sex misconduct. And of course, if you don't have a lot of sex misconduct to write down, you know, if you don't have some really good, you know, Hollywood level sex scandal thing to write about, they'll accuse you of being dishonest. I remember one sponsor actually snickering at me when I had talked about the longest long-term relationship I was ever in with anyone. Herb and I were together, I think, close to about eight years, maybe 7 years. It was close. It was right at 8 years, and that I was faithful to her during that time. And it was kind of an afterthought when I said it. I mean, it was almost like it was a no-brainer. It wasn't like I was trying to virtue signal, you know, by saying it. I just said it kind of offhandedly. I truly loved her, and I, you know, would have done anything not to hurt her, but I just kind of said casually, you know, I was faithful to her. And he kind of, you know, snickered at me, and he tried to make out like, because, you know, you're an alcoholic, you can't possibly, you know, ever have anything even remotely close to any type of principles or ethics whatsoever. I'm not a big fan of using the word morality because it's twisted by AA members, it's twisted by religious people, and any other innumerable things. But it is funny how they tell you to be totally honest in these so-called inventories, but all you're doing is you're listing all the negative characteristics about yourself, and which is supposed to be all confirmed by your fifth step. And then it leads you on to your sixth, seventh step, where you're told that you can't ever become better, that you can't ever overcome anything, that you're always going to be this slimy, creepy, low life, lower than the lowest criminal type of person. And but it is very true in the meetings, because I've heard many people say that you can't get over being sexually abused until you accept that you played a role in that, that you played a part in that. It used to disturb me greatly when I would hear that kind of thing. But I mean, what she's talking about in this article here, the main point that I wanted to nail home out of that paragraph is it's really truly not the same in AA as it is in the outside world, because really it was drilled into my head from the moment that I first walked into Alcoholics Anonymous till the day I left even, and I still had that certainty when I left, that if you leave AA, if you stop doing the fellowship, if you stop working those steps, and if you stop being accepted socially by the AA group and by those old slimers and by the whole entire community in general, that you will start drinking again, and that you will inevitably, drinking means death, or it means institutions, or it means jail. I actually had to experience 2 years outside of the fellowship without a drink, without being arrested, and without going to any mental hospitals, and I'm certainly not dead, I'm right here, before I realized, before it was fully rammed home, that was not the case at all, that plenty of people quit drinking on their own, and plenty of people overcome addictions on their own, and it has nothing to do with it. Intellectually, I already knew this, but emotionally, I didn't feel this. It's really funny, an organization that talks about, feelings are not facts, preys upon your insecurities and your fears and your feelings, which is really a stupid statement anyway. I mean, human beings, or living sentient beings, okay, are feeling beings, okay? A sentient organism processes parts of its logic through the way it feels. I mean, how do you determine good and bad in terms of pain and suffering and pleasure? Part of that is tied up into your emotion. I mean, you would really have to define what is a fact and what is a feeling before you could make such a pathetically idiotic statement as feelings are not facts. Anyway, I don't want to wander too far off on this. I want to glance back on this article because I wanted to do another couple of points. There's one person that was interviewed said they still believe in the program. Well, that person and I would totally part ways. But even that person who was also interviewed, I think their full name here is mentioned, but I'm not going to say that on here. But they said that they even think the fellowship is dangerous, extremely dangerous. And that person also goes on to say that they too were sexually assaulted by a man that they met in AA, and when they spoke out about the assault and filed a protection order, that they were ostracized by fellow AA members, and the membership at the club where home meetings were hosted was revoked. That doesn't surprise me either. Yeah, in spite of the fact AA tells this story that it's all inclusive, and this what is that funny horse shit line? It almost sounds like a cult right there when it says, the realm of the spirit is all inclusive, never exclusive. I mean, the realm of the spirit. I mean, does that not have like a Jim Jones ring to it? I mean, does that not have almost like that wacko that was in Waco, Texas? Does it not kind of sound like that? You could be banned from AA. You can be kicked out of AA. These little groups that are supposedly autonomous are little hierarchies that act like they're a law unto themselves and can do whatever they like. As a matter of fact, here's another member on this same article that says they just can't imagine anybody who attends AA for even a brief period of time that doesn't experience some form of harassment. I can say that's true. And it's not just sexual harassment that I want to talk about that's important here. I mean, there are sponsors who get free labor out of their sponsees. I used to hear old timers saying, I need somebody to paint my house this week, so I'm hoping there's more new people, or I need my lawn mowed. Or they have them showing up early to meetings to do all the cleaning and to do all this other stuff. And then there's those, that borrow money off of you and never pay it back. And of course, if you do complain about that, by the way, the same the same type of double standard applies. You're told to look in your part in it. You gave them the money to begin with. It's funny how AA is preoccupied with only protecting the predators. I mean, when's the last time you heard of some 13-stepper who, they're well known in AA meetings, by the way. Any AA meeting you go to, they've got them, and they're openly kind of celebrated at times. But when have you ever heard of these predators looking at their part in it, or keeping their side of the street clean, or doing any of the other cult slogans they recite in there? One point of contention I would have to make is where the journalist says, look for your part is a 12-step-ism that appears to have derived from a well-meaning passage from AA's main text, the Big Book. Sorry to have to say this, but there's nothing well-meaning and there's nothing good about... Hold on a second, the phone is ringing. What is this? Don't need to talk to them. There's nothing well-meaning and there's nothing even remotely good about the entire main text of the Big Book. Now, I know that the author is doing her best to strive for journalistic objectivity here. And that means that you can't be quite as openly biased as I am towards AA. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm, what's the slogan? Fair and balanced. I'm not going to pretend I'm fair and balanced when it comes to AA at all. But I understand the person's intent as a journalist. You have the journalistic integrity of trying to represent all sides of the fence. But if you read the entire Big Book all the way through and through, you see that there's nothing well-meaning about it whatsoever. What it's doing overall, if you read the entire chapter where Look for Your Part in it is taken from, you can see that what it is all about is saying that you are to blame for everything bad that has ever happened to you, and you are going to be to blame for, something that you might have done as a little kid. Somehow or the other, you played a part in it because you were born deficient. You're born an alcoholic. But look for your part in it. No, it doesn't have anything well-meaning about it whatsoever. But I can see exactly where the author might get that based on this paragraph about putting out of our minds the wrong others have done. But it's really just it's a convenient way to set yourself up to be a doormat all the days of your life. Now, if you notice, again, the look for your part in it doesn't happen to AA old-timer cult members. I mean, when you hear them sharing meetings, you never see them doing anything generally but doing this whole almost like, look at me up here on my throne, feed off my words and everything. You never see them ever talking about something like confessing to, say, something they did really criminally wrong and how they really want to do the right thing by it, especially when they're talking about their amendments. They don't even come remotely close to it. It's really sickening. You would have to actually participate in AA meetings to know about it. And of course, right here, again, there's another little bit of a disagreement because it says what began as a recommendation encouraging members to take personal responsibility for their actions and let go of resentments against others for the sake of their own well-being is apparently being used in many 12-step groups as a way to put the responsibility for sexual assault and sex harassment within the community on the victims. Here I also got to disagree because if you read anything about the original founder of AA, if you read about Bill W., there was nothing well-meaning about the man from day one, or Dr. Bob, or any of those people. The entire religion of AA was taken from this phony organization that was headed by Frank Buckman called the Oxford Group, which their primary purpose was to steal money. Not really steal money, but it was almost kind of like some of the New Age gurus that you see today. I can give you spiritual enlightenment and I can give you well-being if you just give me, a couple of $1,000s here and there, or pledge a monthly donation for however much money, because after all, spiritual enlightenment, money is but a small price to pay for that. That's originally what it began as. It's always been a con game, and it always, it never had any good intentions about it. Now, I mean, in order to back that up, of course, I would need some kind of level of proof, and what I would have to say is look at the very last speech that Bill W. gave, the founder of AA. You can Google it online really easily. I mean, that's all you got to do. You type in Bill W.'s last speech. And he says anonymity, he talks about anonymity being a spiritual principle. And he talks about anonymity, and by the way, where is anonymity spiritual? I've never heard of anonymity even being, not in any definition I've ever heard of spirituality, but without getting off base here, he says that AA provides security for those who use AA for sick and selfish purposes. Okay, and I always feel compelled to repeat that when I say it, even for those who use it for sick and selfish purposes. That means that in the very beginning, in the foundation of the program, it was set up in such a way that if you wanted to walk in off the street, you've never had a problem with drinking in your entire life, and you wanted to just find easy victims and people to prey upon, which Bill W. engaged in most of his life, I might add, then anonymity, the spiritual foundation, as he calls it, was meant to actually protect you. And I don't really see how you could argue that as being spiritual. I realize spiritual is kind of a perceptual thing. I realize it's more of a subjective thing. It's not something that you could easily define. I mean, you look at what AA calls spiritual, and it's really just another twisted version of religion. It's the idea that there's this all-powerful, all-knowing deity that punishes you because you pick up a drink, but you have a disease that you're powerless over. So the same deity actually gave you the disease that now punishes you for drinking. Yeah, that doesn't really add up. But anyway, and then it says, and while it hasn't been this way for everyone in the program, a pattern of oppression persists. I'm going to guarantee that for most people in the program, it has been that way in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I think the only people that say they never saw anything like this, the only people that say they never saw any abuse or ever felt or ever had any creepy old timers hit on them or prey on them or something is generally either part of the social hierarchy or they're just lying. I looked at the comments on this article, and there were so many people that were telling a familiar lie. The familiar lie is always, that never happened at my AA meeting. And just to give you a personal anecdote here, I know it doesn't count as actual physical evidence. I don't have it on recording. But I've heard predatory 13-stepping old-timers who were actively engaged in doing that actually sit and say with a straight face, I've never seen any inappropriate behavior in my AA meeting before. Yeah, it's really just that bad. Okay. And here we go from someone else in the program who actually published a memoir about it. I don't feel the need to advertise for him. Hey, absolutely saved my life. I gotta pause. I've heard that over and over and over and over again as a good defense mechanism for the religious cult of Quackaholics Anonymous. They all say it at one point or the other. AA has absolutely saved my life. It sounds really good to people who are not involved in the fellowship and don't know exactly what kinds of things go on from a lot of these people. And that's another reason why I'm not going to mention this person's name, because I'm not going to accuse them or bracket them of being in the same kind of category. But I also feel that it's appropriate to say that when you say AA has absolutely saved your life, I mean, no doubt this lady probably believes that, but there is another double standard in AA that I feel needs to be explored and it needs to be talked about, and that's the fact is, if you are actually sober, if you're actually doing well in life, well is, again, kind of open to interpretation, but if you're doing well in life and everything is going good, AA automatically wants to snag the credit for that. It wants to say, you're only doing well in life because of AA. You're only experiencing a less stressful, alcohol-free life because of AA. But if something bad happened to you, okay, if something goes wrong and you end up stumbling, and what I mean by stumbling, you end up drinking again, or you end up getting drunk again, or anything bad happens to you whatsoever, AA does a complete turn, and it says, that's all your fault. You did something about, you caused that to happen because you are a selfish, self-centered, diseased alcoholic. That's why bad things are happening to you. It has nothing to do with the program. For instance, a lot of times, if someone is, let's just say, behaving really well in the world, and let's just say they're really honestly doing that, perhaps this writer who says AA absolutely saved her life, perhaps let's just say she's doing well in the world, and she's actually done a complete and total turnaround from whatever it was that was in her past. AA will say the steps in AA did that. But if you take somebody like my old sponsor, who used to buy food stamps off of people who were drug addicts and used to sexually abuse women, and who used to, or still does, I don't know why I'm saying used to, who would call family members of other AA people behind their back and cause their homes to get wrecked, okay? When you have somebody doing those types of things in the program, then the AA program will say it has nothing to do with AA whatsoever. I mean, you really can't credit a program for absolutely saving your life unless you're willing to kind of look at a larger picture and say, okay, if the program can save your life, then it's probably destroyed some lives, right? I mean, when you have a completely blameless platform that refuses to look at the abysmal failure rate of all the members who have fallen by the wayside, then there is a bit of an issue there. I mean, it should be, to me, 100% obvious, but I'll leave you guys to decide that. I mean, I think anybody who's been in AA and who watches these videos of mine already knows what I'm talking about. And let's see, what's next on this article? I'm going on a little longer than usual, but pull up a chair. 13 stepping is a phrase all of the women I spoke with are familiar with. It's not an actual step in the program, but rather an expression commonly used within the fellowship to refer to the practice in which elder members with more years of sobriety sexually pursue newcomers because they're in a vulnerable state and more open to manipulation. Yeah, 100% true. I've heard it in the fellowship numerous times. I would like to point out, from my own personal experiences and from the experiences of friends of mine, that you do have predatory females in AA as well. And I'm not talking about. I'm talking about in cases where. I mean, I have one good friend of mine who's lesbian, who was sexually exploited by a woman sponsor. I've known women in the program who really bully the younger women, the female members. There's one woman in the program that's hailed as this big giant guru in the home group I used to go to, and she had a lot of women who trusted her the way that you're supposed to trust your sponsors, right? And this particular guru, she ended up taking up with this girl's boyfriend. Okay, and the boyfriend broke up with this girl when she was still pregnant. So I mean, I would think you wouldn't call that necessarily sexual misconduct, but you would certainly. I mean, I don't see any way you could defend that ethically. I don't see any way you could defend that morally. I mean, if some guy trusted me with his life and said, will you help me? And I said, oh yeah, sure, I'll help you clean your life up. I'll help you be a better person. And then I went and stole his wife from him. I mean, that's total scumbag behavior. There's no way around that. And I think that it's important to realize that kind of behavior also goes on. I think it's important to realize that there are a lot of vulnerable young women who come into AA that put their trust into elderly AA women, not elderly in age, but elderly in terms of they've been in the program for a long time, and they too are the type of people that will steal from them or abuse them, bully them. In fact, it's almost like high school. I know that the one AA group that I was talking about, where you had this one female that kind of was the go-to female, all the young newcomer girls more or less looked up to her. If you fell out of favor with her, it was almost like high school. You could be ostracized. You could be made to feel uncomfortable. You could be chased away. And I think that, a lot of people would say, well, that's, if you don't like that situation, you need to leave. I think it's important to also remind people that these people are coming into AA thinking this is the only way possible to get sober, to save their lives. We're talking about people that have been living on the streets, strung out on drugs, that are putting their trust into these people to help save their lives. And instead, they're getting used and abused. I mean, I think that that's something more, I think that needs to be brought out into the open more. I mean, in addition to women sharing their stories about men who sexually harass them and abuse them, which needs to be out there as much as possible, I think it also needs to be brought up how many old timer women abuse the younger the newcomer women who come into the program that are honestly looking for help, and they're exploited and they're mistreated. I mean, I saw numerous incidents of that, and anybody out there who's female and who's watching this probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I would urge more to come forward about that too. I think all the abusive aspects of AA, all the abusive aspects of all the gurus, it needs to be brought out into the open. It needs to be exposed repeatedly until the public at large realizes what kind of dangerous, psychotic, fucked up cult that it really is. Okay, let's go back to the article. Rant over on that one. Here we go with victim blaming. The same cult member that was talking about how AA had saved their life goes ahead and says it's a responsibility of those entering the program to go in with their eyes open. If you're expecting it to be a room full of saints, you're an idiot. It's a place where sick people go to get better. Well, sick people aren't getting better in AA, okay? Especially when you got sick fucking assholes running the goddamn program claiming to be better. But let me continue on. It's a loony bin. Wherever there's a power hierarchy, there's going to be sexual abuse. AA is no different. There's a power hierarchy. Okay, that's absolute garbage, because when you go into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and you got somebody sitting there and they're telling you, I used to be just like you, I drank just like you, I drugged just like you, I did the things you did, and now today, I'm living a completely different life. I'm living almost, I'm walking on fucking cloud nine. I'm walking up there in the fucking stratosphere for how spiritual I am. That person has a tendency to put their trust in you, and you're going to take that trust and you're going to violate it. Okay, you're going to crush their trust. You're going to destroy that person, and then when they go back to abusing alcohol, or when they go back to doing whatever, then you're going to say, by the grace of God. That's another thing the Vice article needs to talk about, how many members will openly celebrate when somebody picks up a bottle and drinks and drugs again, and they say, it's by the grace of God that I'm not doing that, after they are responsible for that. I mean, ethically, or any kind of position or standpoint of value, or any kind of standpoint of just plain old common fucking decency. And I'm no, moral shrew, I'm no moral Puritan or anything like that. But I mean, honestly, if somebody comes to you and they say that I've got a drug problem, I've got an alcohol problem, I can't stop, and you tell them that you had the same problem and that you overcame that problem, and you're going to show them how to do that, all they got to do is put their trust in you, and then you proceed to sexually abuse them, okay? You proceed to monetarily exploit them. It's not the same fucking thing at all as saying, well, you're not in a room full of saints, don't worry about it. I mean, you're not supposed to set up an atmosphere where you're saying everybody in here is striving to get better. This is a safe place. That's what was said to me a lot of the times when I first came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a safe place. This is a place where people are trying to overcome their addictions. This is a place where if you've got psychological problems, or if you've got, mental problems that's forcing you to drink, this is the place to come and be, and for us to help heal you. So to set up a society and to tell people that it's a safe place, a place to trust, and then you fuck those people over, you steal from those people, and you abuse those people, and then you're going to turn around and victim blame and say, well, you should have known before you got here that we're not all perfect in here. That's victim blaming, okay? That's victim fucking blaming. And it doesn't absolve AA whatsoever. It's just making excuses for a dangerous cult. Okay, that's all it's doing. It's saying we're not to blame for what happens to you, even though we know when you come into the room that there's 13 steppers in here, even though we know when you come into the room that there's There's people in here that are here for the sole purpose of preying on the newcomers. We know these things, but we don't warn you about that. We just tell you that you're here to quit drinking and we're here to help. And then when something bad happens to you, they say, well, it's your fault. You were stupid. Okay, ran over on that one. Now, what I'm reading about here, I'm not even going to bother to read the whole entire paragraph, where the person claims that there's like a Wild West force, a police force in AA, where AA groups will run sexual predators out. Okay, now that's a flat out lie. That's a complete and total fabrication. I've watched, okay, in multiple meetings. I'm not talking about just one meeting I went to in 12 years of AA. I'm talking about multiple meetings I've been to in the state of New Jersey, in the state of New York, in the state of Massachusetts, in the state of Tennessee, in the state of Mississippi, where open sexual predators, it was almost kind of like grinned about in a almost childish type of way, like it was high school or something. Oh yeah, he likes to screw the newcomer chicks, but we're all sick in here. So that's complete total fabrication. I'm not even going to bother to respond to that one. That's bullshit. So, and then she goes on to talk about Monica Richardson, who made the film 13 Step to Film. It's available on Vimeo too if you want to watch it. And let's see, let me scroll on down because there was a couple of other things I wanted to comment on before I close this video. I realize this is a long video. It's a long response video. But okay, the lady who wrote this article is saying she contacted AA's General Service Office for comment on the story and asked about the organization's handling of what appears to be a rampant problem. It doesn't appear to be a rampant problem. It is a rampant problem. Ask anybody. It is a rampant problem. Okay, and it says they responded by directing her to 2 pamphlets released in 2017. Safety in AA, Our Common Welfare. I don't even have to look at that. Safety card for AA meetings, which they say should be made available to AA groups in the U.S. and Canada, should they choose to utilize them. Check that fine print, should they choose to. And it says some groups have chosen to address these issues of harassment through their group conscience. That is a lie. Okay, I've been to enough AA meetings and business meetings that I know what the group conscience is all about. The group conscience is usually about whether or not they'll allow a drug addict to attend. In other words, if you come into the meeting and you say, I'm a drug addict, some AA groups will throw you out. They'll say, well, you don't belong here. Okay, that's group conscience. Group conscience is usually something to do about the money. Okay, business meetings usually are about some silly-ass committee that's going to order big books or something like that. Never once have I ever heard an AA member, a business meeting, ever address something about sexual harassment. As a matter of fact, what they talk about all the time and what they fall back on to make excuses for sexual harassment and sexual predatory behavior is they say that it's an outside issue. They go back to their traditions. They go back to the traditions where it says AA has no opinion on an outside issue, meaning AA doesn't care if you're sexually harassed or not. It has nothing to do with them. That's what they use that outside issues thing for. AA doesn't care what you do in those meetings. Okay, it doesn't care about the safety of its members. Now, it cares about protecting the old-timer predators. It cares about protecting all those power-mad bastards that do the things they do, but it doesn't care about anybody who's on the bottom rung. As a matter of fact, you can ask anybody who's left AA or any AA member who's totally honest, and they'll tell you there's never been a group conscience about sexual predators, probably because most of the sexual predators are the people who are in the social hierarchy that run the damn meeting. All right, back. Here the journalist is talking about when she pressed further for more information, for specific answers and not general vague answers, that the responses was always the same. Like if a rep was asking for women to look for their part in sexual assault, harassment, exploitation, and abuse was a practice endorsed by the GSO. And more or less just said the flyers addressed the question. And it was the same deal when she asked General Service Offices if they've ever considered establishing a hotline for members of AA who experienced sexual harassment or assault at the hands of another group member. And they just said refer to the flyers. Yeah, you know, it's real convenient how these people are. I mean, it's so fucking typical that this would happen to her. They're not going to give you any straight, direct answers. They're only interested in protecting their cult. And you're not allowed to go to any AA meetings. You know, you're not allowed to walk into an AA meeting and if you get called on, say, you know, hi, my name is hi, my name is John, and I'm just here to listen. They'll all freak out. Their group conscience is real specific about that. They'll all jump up and they'll say, do you have a desire to stop drinking? And if you say you don't have a desire to stop drinking, they'll throw you out. That's what the group conscience is used for. I was in AA for 12 fucking years. I know about their group conscience. I know about their phony fucking hierarchy. Okay, nobody in the offices cares. Nobody in the social hierarchy cares about what really goes on in those AA meetings. Every single time I ever pointed out any foul behavior going on by these people that are in these meetings, I was always told the same line. It's called some are sicker than others. And that only applies to AA old-timers. It doesn't apply to people who are really struggling with their drinking problems. All right. I think that that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk about. I ran it a little bit. I can't help it. I get to thinking about the way that this has been going on for so long, and it's been going on since the early founded days of AA. I just get emotionally carried away with it. But yeah, Vice.com. I'll put the link in the comments section at the bottom. This is a long video, so. But yeah, it's really commendable. I have to. The journalist's name is Elizabeth Brown. I just now saw that. I scrolled to the top. I didn't say her name at the beginning of this video like I should have, because I really want to give a good shout out to Elizabeth Brown for exposing them for what they really are, and I really respect her courage for doing that, because it's almost like. In 12-step culture today, 12-step culture has somehow eked its way into the mainstream establishment culture where everybody thinks it's, this harmless little thing you see on Lifetime movies or something like that. So I really have to really commend her for having the courage to write the article. As a matter of fact, I hope more articles like this are done. I hope more people come forward. I hope more journalists look into this sort of thing. And I hope that I hope that magazines and newsletters don't cave to the pressure of Quackaholics Anonymous and the fact that they have powerful members in the government and in the news media even, Anyway, I guess I will see you guys next week.